Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves. The War of 1812 is told by Jack Baker.
The War of 1812, also known as the Second Revolutionary War by people who don't really know what a revolution is, was, under all accounts, an absolutely terrible idea. The Americans had already annoyed the British by making their own country
with blackjack and hookers.
But since the British had other concerns with Napoleon trying to kill them and all, so they just kind of sat giving America the death stare while hoping that eventually they would hate being their own country and come crying back to them. But when that didn't happen, and the British were still fighting with Napoleon and needed more sailors, they decided to pay more attention to America. And by attention, I mean making a hostile takeover and putting all of the sailors from American ships into their own navy, because obviously making people hate you fighting your army has never had any negative consequences in the past. Not only that, but the British were also very friendly with the natives who are currently in the process of being screwed over by America. This got even more obvious when they helped Tecumseh make his own tribal federation
with blackjack and hookers.
Unfortunately, Tecumseh's new federation
with blackjack and hookers
would be very short-lived, and in 1811, America fought the Confederation Army at the Battle of Tippecanoe and burned down the Confederation capital of Prophetstown, forcing its government to leave, which will in no way be reciprocated back on the Americans in the future. Because of all this and the fact that almost all of the native tribes in America allied against America, we basically said, screw it! The empire we just barely successfully revolted against with the biggest army in the world would never be able to beat us again! What could possibly go wrong? The current president, James Bald Eagle Freedom Tears Madison, didn't really like the idea of fighting the army we barely won against due to an amazing set of lucky breaks that amounted into somehow winning would be a good idea. But, unfortunately, Congress voted for the war 79-49 in the House and 19-13 in the Senate. And, like a chihuahua growling at a tank, hopelessly trying to intimidate it, we thought we were far more intimidating than we actually were. We allied with the three Native American tribes, all conveniently with names starting with C. The Choctaw, the Cherokee, and part of the Creek. And we fought against the British, as well as the Spanish, who ventured in too late to do anything of consequence, as well as the Shawnee, the other half of the Creeks, the Ojibwe, the Chickamauga, the Fox, the Iroquois, the Miami, the Mongo, the Ottawa, the Kickapoo, the Delaware, Tecumseh's Confederacy, the Mascoutin, the Potawatomi, the Sauk, and the Wyandot. It turns out that taking people's land, even more than you already were, is not a good idea for making people like you. So, with that out of the way, not 11 days after we declared war, General William Hull thought it was a great idea to invade Canada. All of it. A month later, after that, we already lost Detroit, beginning a wonderful American tradition of not caring about Detroit. We won the Battle of Lake Erie in 1813, where 9 of our ships captured 6 British ships, which, when compared to most naval combat not involving a half-filled bathtub, seems rather quaint, actually helped lead the way to the Battle of Thames later that year in Canada, where we killed Tecumseh, along with his dreams of
blackjack and hookers.
Oh, and we also, begrudgingly, took back Detroit, most likely after a large amount of negotiations with Britain begging them to take Detroit back after we made the mistake of getting it. Even with another set of strokes of luck like that, we still, just like in the Revolutionary War, had a series of losses so close to killing us that the fact that they didn't is a minor miracle. While in 1813, like a tank being intimidated by a chihuahua, it was too busy doing actual tank things and fighting in the actually important wars against Napoleon, the British didn't actually dignify America with much of a response besides, the natives will do it for us. But when they won against Napoleon in 1814, now they could focus their entire attention on crushing that chihuahua with their tank treads and moving on to even more important things. While we were thinking we could totally win this just because we killed Tecumseh, the British reminded us of our place in an act which is in no way poetic justice when they burned our capital and forced our government to leave. The British realized that taking people who hated you and forcing them into your navy didn't really make your navy the best navy. So, the Americans and the British decided to start negotiating peace terms in Ghent, creatively named the Treaty of Ghent. While the treaty was still being written, we fought several battles with the British and in general lost, except for one major one at New Orleans, where with a smaller force, we still managed to win. And Madison was sending off his 4 delegates to actually negotiate the treaty. He intended for them not to make many big demands and hopefully get peace so we wouldn't all die. But, unfortunately, again, just like a chihuahua attempting to intimidate a tank who thinks he is far more intimidating than he actually is, we made a lot of demands, including that we wanted all of Canada, which obviously didn't go very far. Finally, after a large amount of bickering, capital burning, and in general losing except for New Orleans, both sides agreed to the demands and finally ratified a treaty on December 24th, 1814. But because of the Atlantic Ocean and the terrible ways of transmitting information at the time, it took a while for both sides to fully agree and for the information to actually reach both sides. So the war ended in February 1815, leaving us in a massive amount of debt. Yay! Overall, the war was a terrible idea, leaving us in massive amounts of debt, having to rebuild our capital, our navy, our army, and us being stuck with still having Detroit. So while we won the war just because we didn't get totally obliterated, whereas the British continued with their pattern of colonizing all the things and still being the biggest army in the world, after 2 wars, however, the British decided to ignore us and just get some new, shinier colonies.
With blackjack and hookers.